she will sign. Her interpreters will then tell us, hearing people, what she's explaining. And we hope you enjoy it. When you're finished here, please wander on down there and take a look at what they have going on. Okay? Again, Nancy Ward from Loveland, Colorado. Thank you. Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. So I've been here at the art fair, Arts Beats and Meets, for 5 years now. This is my 5th year now. So we used to be on 7th Street over there. This time we moved to a new location over here. It's close to the parking lot. So I hope you guys will come visit our booth over there. So I'd like to give you a little bit of an introduction to myself. I was born deaf. My parents didn't know that I was deaf. They didn't know that until I was 6 years old, so that was pretty late to discover that. At first, the doctors thought I had a learning disability. My speech was not right, I couldn't speak. And then later on, when I was around 6 years old, my parents started noticing that I wasn't hearing anything. Like if they were calling to me, I wouldn't react. So they started to suspect that maybe I was deaf. They sent me back to the doctor. I had more tests and they found out that I was indeed deaf. It was not a learning disability. So that's one way that my art developed from that experience. It was my way of trying to communicate with my own parents through art. My parents really encouraged me. They encouraged me to go to school and study art, and that's how I became an artist. You can see some of my art here on the stage. I started this in the year 2010, and I started something called DEVIA. D-E, Deaf, View, and it's a deaf visual arts. I'm going to give you a history of DEVIA. DEVIA art, it's a movement. It started in 1979. They developed their own movement, their own manifesto. This manifesto was something that was signed, and it came from people's deaf experience. Hearing people also had some input. The people that were maybe a little bit involved in the deaf community, or they were children of deaf adults, they had deaf parents, but they were hearing children of deaf parents, interpreters, different people that were involved in the deaf community. They can be involved in the DEVIA movement, the art movement. I use very powerful colors that focuses on hands and eyes. That's one of the elements of the motifs for eyes and mouth movements for the deaf experience. So I focus on the ear. And there's many more motifs that I use as well. I call it the second wave of DEVIA, and that's my movement. My movement has become a little more political, activism and advocacy for deaf people through art. I support artists, and I also go out in the community through rallies and protests and that kind of thing. Now I would like to explain about my art. I only use 3 colors, red, yellow, and blue. That's my style for my art. That's my trademark. So there's a meaning behind each color. The red symbolizes power. Yellow symbolizes hope, hope and lights, seeing the light and deaf people. And then oppression is the blue. It also represents autism, which is a word that describes discrimination and oppression of deaf people. My art is based on the deaf experience. It's not just about my personal experience growing up. Some of it is my personal experience, but it's about the deaf community in general. It's what people have experienced and seen. That's what I express through my art. The message that I am trying to show with my art is a collective world of the deaf experience, the education of deaf people. I try to educate people about it. There's 3 categories in DABE. One is affirmations. Another category is resistance. And then the third category is called liberation. For the affirmations, that's something to be proud of your deafhood. Proud of deaf culture, the community, the history, your identity, and signing American Sign Language, ASL. So that's affirmation. The resistance portion, that focuses more on for the truth to be told. For example, many deaf people in the past were afraid to show that they were deaf because they had bad experiences. But now it's time to show the world who we are and what happened in the past. For example, deaf children, before they were forced to try to learn to be oral and speak, there might be one deaf child in a hearing class, they would feel very isolated. Now, I have one of my pieces here. I have another one, but this one here, my experience, I grew up in a mainstream program where I was the only deaf person in a hearing classroom. I felt very isolated. I didn't make a connection with anybody. I had no one to talk with. Nobody communicated with me, and I was bullied. I just felt alone. I had an FM hearing system, which was a hearing aid device that I wore around my neck. It was very awkward. I would put my coat over it because I was embarrassed and I didn't want to show this. I didn't want to look different and be bullied. If it was a hot day, I still had my coat on because I was embarrassed and I didn't want to show my FM box that I wore around my neck. Later on, I decided I was going to incorporate that into my painting and express my experience about that. I wanted some closure on that experience, so I expressed it through my art. So that is the resistance category. Now today, this still happens with children. They might have a cochlear implant. They go to a mainstream school, a hearing school. Then eventually they transfer to a deaf school. I went to visit a deaf school. I was teaching art there. I asked the high school students to go ahead and paint their portrait, their self-portrait. Some of them didn't know their identity. They didn't know if they should identify as deaf or hearing. I said, go ahead and paint them both. Paint how you feel. And this is what they came up with. They had a dual identity. They painted themselves half. One side of themselves, they felt deaf, and the other side, they felt hearing with the cochlear implant. The color symbolizes the deaf half. And then the blue tape over the mouth here, this blue tape, and over the ear, That's deaf. Not speaking and not hearing, but they're signing, they're using their hand, and they're proud of it. The other side, the other half, you see, the mouth shows it's focusing on oral, on listening and speaking. So their identity is really mixed. They feel both. They don't have one solid identity. When they finished painting themselves like this, they started to realize that they're starting to know their own identity. So art can really help people express themselves, figure out their identity. It's like therapy. I call that resistance. That's in the resistance category. Now this one here, that's one in the affirmation category. All of the art that I do has many motifs. One of the motifs in this one here is a bee. You know, bees are deaf. A lot of bees make honey. They're very hard workers. They're focused on their goal. They work as a team, and they make delicious honey, right? So it's the same thing with deaf people. They work hard, they focus on their goals, on signing, they cherish signing in their community. So it's similar to the bee and how they interact with each other. This painting shows a girl, and it says, I am deaf with a small d, a lowercase d. So that means the medical view of deafness, that they can't hear. You know, the scientific definition. It focuses only on hearing, the small d deaf. Now you'll notice the final expression here says, let me be deaf, with a capital D, an uppercase D. So that means I'm culturally deaf. So that's what this symbolizes. They don't see themselves as deaf with a capital D. They're not involved in the culture or signing. They see it as the small d focuses more on a disability, but the capital D, you feel free, you feel liberated, that you're yourself. So this just opens up, and it's a feeling of freedom. The bee is carrying a banner, the sign, and it's affirmation. This is another piece of affirmation art. This is the sign for America. This is something based on Chuck Baird. He's a famous deaf artist, and he focused a lot on signing, and this sign here for America. That's what inspired me. Betty G. Miller is another artist that inspired me. Those were the first 2 out of 9 artists that set up the Divya movement. That was over 25 years ago. I think maybe 27 years ago was the first Divya movement. Now I call this one ASL Rocks. And this is a piece of affirmation art. I also have a book.
This is my personal book, and it tells a little about myself and my experience growing up. It also involves some of my art, but mostly it focuses on my painting and why I have chosen 3 different colors and the meaning behind those colors. Here I only included half of my paintings. Since 2010, I have painted over 1,700 paintings, you know, and I'm focusing more on the deaf art. So really, this is only 1/3 of my paintings included in my book. So I'm hoping that I'm going to be able to write a second book in order to include more of my work. So today, what I'm going to be doing, you know, I'm going to, for example, when I do my daily painting, I travel a lot to different deaf residential schools, and I teach art to deaf children from kindergarten all the way to high school. I'm also the coordinator for DIVIA curriculum movement, and we host different workshops every summer. And we have also different art teachers that come from the residential schools, so we can train them and they can go back and teach the curriculum in their schools. And also they will have lesson plans that they can incorporate with their deaf students. And obviously they will make the accommodations depending on the students' abilities. So next year we are going to be in Indianapolis, in Indiana School for the Deaf, which is located in Indianapolis. They have around 300 people coming to this training. So the group of instructors that are coming to our work summer program is increasing. Now, this is a way that we have other programs that we host every 2 years. It's a retreat for deaf artists that they can come and they share the techniques and they share the arts with other deaf artists. I also travel a lot, for different art shows. I also have visit different art galleries. I work with KC in Colorado. That's one of the artists that is here with me. He's also part of the KC gallery in Colorado. Nelson Atkinson, the Art Museum, is also part of KC. He's going to be housed in that museum for a month. So I think that's all for today. I have my business cards. If you would like to see my website and visit and see some of my paintings, please come and get one. I also have in my website, I have a more explanation what my paintings reflect. And also you can visit my booth. We are just around the corner, and I wonder if any of you have any questions for me. Okay, so I think that's it for today. I really appreciate you coming. Thank you very much.